Hey animal science students, I want to spend a few minutes discussing digestion and nutrition on a deeper level. I know we've spent a lot of time looking at the classes of nutrients that all livestock animals need and the differences in the proportions that they may need based on what you're using them for, as well as how old they are, as well as if it's a ruminant animal versus a monogastric or a chicken. Now what I have behind me is just here on the farm with our own sheep or our own goats and our baby calf that we're bottle feeding, some of the different feeds and supplements that we have, and I'm going to show you how to read them, and then I'm going to ask you as part of your assignment to be able to go online and use some websites I'm going to give you to go do your own shopping for certain situations. So what I have here is a couple of the sample bags we've been feeding our goats and our cows here recently. And I just want to use them as an example to demonstrate how you actually read different feed bags and understand the key parts of what that bag or that type of feed might be best to feed certain animals in certain situations. Now, I want to mention that these bags, I mean, they're not cheap as packaging. And so a lot of producers or a lot of feed manufacturers will take something like this Purple Vision, for example. It has lots of different species. You see a cow and a pig and a goat and a sheep. And in some situations, like this sweet feed, it really can be used for multiple species. But it's a lot cheaper for the manufacturer to just make a nice, eye-catching, simple bag. And then what you really need to pay attention to, if you look on the back, it has a generic statement about it. But you have to really look at this tag down here. And that tag, very cheaply and much more quickly than redesigning an entire big fancy bag, very cheaply they can change this and add this as they're making the bags, as they sew these bags up. And this right here, this orange tag, this ticket fee, that's what you need to be paying attention to. All right, so same thing with the show right, and then even this sweet feed. So the 12%, what does that mean? 12%, when you see that, it's referencing the percent of protein, okay? And then you have to see how big is the bag. So this is a 50-pound bag, and most are typically 50-pound bags. So protein is always your most expensive ingredient when you're trying to figure out what to feed your animals. Now, I've been told by feed experts that sometimes you can tell the quality of the feed that you're feeding just by looking at the waste that the animal creates. If an animal creates a whole lot of excessive waste and you're having to find yourself cleaning out their stalls a whole lot, it may very well be that there's a whole lot of filler in it, and it might be why it was cheaper to purchase. And the animals, it's not been formulated into a type of formulation that the animal's body can easily and readily absorb. So that's also something you got to take into consideration as well. Okay, so if we look on this show right bag, for example, what does it say? Okay, so it tells us, first of all, you see that diagonal medicated in the deeper pink color. Medication means that it does have something put in there that would, it says at the top, prevention of coccidiosis. Okay, now when you have young animals and they're growing quickly, coccidiosis is something that can cause a lot of problems and cause them to go downhill very quickly. And it gives them basically the scours or basically diarrhea. And it's different. Antibiotics will not fix this. This is its own classification. And if you can put a little bit of this coccidiostat made into it, it basically keeps it at bay. Percentage of crude protein is 15%. And then you can see on down, it's got the fat, it's got some salt and calcium, which are of course your minerals. And then it also then tells you specific ingredients there. It has a caution. And it tells you the feeding directions. It also has to always tell you where you got it from, where it was, in case there was an issue and something went really bad, they can always trace it back and know what lot number. So they can also then find other show right dealers or whatever the feed may be and let their customers know, basically like a recall, like we do for human food as well. Okay, so that's 15%. That's 12%. So just based on protein alone, you can probably tell that the show right's going to be significantly more. Now, if you have an animal, you're trying to put on a lot of muscling. We know that crude protein is the key ingredient for that. So what is the percentage of this? 32%. So you do not use this. Now you can have too much protein. There is a thing as too much of a good thing. So if you see under the directions for use, it says that this is a top dress. Top dressing is a supplemental protein source for muscle dimension. So what a lot of folks that use this will do is they just add a little bit extra. Basically, if you want to think of it like the Livestock Animals protein shake. That's probably the best way to put this. And there's other options over here depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, so that is something to look at. Now, if you look at this one has also some vitamins. Okay, so this comes in, this is not sweet. This is very dry feeling. Okay, if you were to look in the sweet feed, it says it's textured. It's got a mixture of things, and it's got, it's very moist feeling, so that it's very palatable. So fat is an ingredient, just like in humans. That's why we like ice cream and chocolate and cheesecake. It tastes good to us. It makes it, the key word there is palatable. And so in this case, these are goat treats. This is something that we use to train the animals, and it has probiotics, which are beneficial bacteria that helps them, just like when we eat yogurt, for example. And sometimes, again, when they're growing rapidly, or if they're pregnant, their gut gets out of whack. And if you give them probiotics, just like humans can take it, it's good beneficial bacteria that goes into their gut, into their rumen, because a goat is a ruminant animal, and allows them to be able to digest better and be able to absorb nutrients better. Now that, if you had smell-o-vision here, it smells really, really good, and this is in particular apple flavor. If you flip it over on the back, you can see here it has 14% crude protein, so it's pretty good. But this is not intended to be used for feed alone. Say hi. Say hi, Zeus. And then the last thing that I was going to show you is here is another one for horses. And they're made to taste really, really good. Now, if you look here, though, it only has what percentage? 9% crude protein. But it has some other things in there. If you look down, it has selenium and copper and some vitamins that are really important. If you look, though, you know that it doesn't have a lot of protein because it has cracked corn and ground oats as the first ingredients. And we know that those are not classified as protein sources. They are more as carbohydrates. Now, the soybean meal right there would be your plant-based protein source, and your soybean oil would be your fat. Now, one thing that I want palatable, do you see that right there? That means that it tastes good, and the horses will want to have it, which makes it more of a treat. All right, so one last thing. When you look at ingredients, I apologize for the dog. He really wants me to throw the ball for him. See his ball? Watch this. Zeus, you're going to make a... He'll come back wanting more. When you look at the ingredients, they're always listed. The #1 ingredient that you see, cracked corn, is representation of the largest percentage ingredient in the entire container. And then it goes from there. So there's more cracked corn. The second most volume ingredient is ground oats, and then it goes all the way down to the very bottom. These are the smallest in the smallest amounts. So you're going to need to know that, because that's going to tell you a key indicator of really what's in there. A lot of times with your pet dogs and cats, you go and get a cheaper dog food. Well, the reason that some of the dog foods are more expensive is you look at the first ingredient. Meat is always going to be more expensive than if corn or a plant base is going to be your #1 ingredient. I hope this helps understand a little bit about what you're looking at on a feed bag.
I'm going to have an assignment I'm going to upload for you in which you're going to have to do this visually or digitally and start seeking. You're going to be a shopper for animals for certain situations. And I'm excited to see what you come up with based on the budget and based on circumstances. Good luck.
This is the sweet feed, and it smells really good, but it is sticky a little bit, and that's from the molasses, which acts as a binder, and it's fat, but it's also basically like candy. So it puts a lot of extra calories and energy on the animal in a way that makes them want to eat it. Hey, so what I want to talk to you about now is what's behind me. Hey, so these are round bells. This is a roughage. You have to understand that if you're talking about what do you feed ruminant animals, that you have to have some sort of a roughage for a large portion of their diet. Now, roughages doesn't mean just hay. There's some other things that can be classified in there, but hay is most definitely the most common and easiest to get. So let's talk about a couple of things with roughages. So this hay behind me we're in April right now when I'm filming this video, and it was cut at the end of the summer, probably, well, it was going into fall. So probably, I think our last cutting was September-ish. And so this has been kept under a shelter, so it's had no rain on it, which is an important factor you need to understand. The better quality of the hay, all hay is not created equal, and if you can keep water off of a round bale or square bale for sure, then it's going to keep it to have better nutrients and calories for the animals to take during the winter months. You bale up hay, in particular, to feed them during the winter months when there's nothing green growing. But the hay is cut when it's still green and it dries out and it preserves those nutrients. Round bales are they're about equivalent depending on the size of I don't know, 20, 30 square bales. They're very heavy. They range depending on what size baler you have, from 800 to 1,200 pounds. And these have, I can show you, there's different types of ways that this has like a green netting on it that holds it tight so that it doesn't fall apart. When you're looking at feeding round bales, you need to make sure that you're checking that they're not too dusty and that they don't have any mold on them. If they have been sitting out in the rain, that's okay. They're round so that the water kind of sheds off of it. And there tends to be a little layer on the top that's not good quality that you kind of need to just throw to the side as waste. But these don't have any of those bad spots because they have been kept under this big shelter. I want to walk up and show you one of our round bales that wasn't built up real tight, and so it busted on us, and we've just been using it to feed our animals here on the farm. You'll notice that well, you may not, but it's actually pretty short. I want to say that also your roughages, you want to cut it when it's not real. There's a fine line between being too short and too long. It gets to a point where it gets real tough, and sometimes picky animals don't want to eat it. Now, we talked about also what would be some other things that are considered roughages. So roughage is something that's going to have a lot of fiber in it. So it's going to be things like cottonseed can be considered a roughage. There's different types of hay. So this hay has a lot of carbohydrates in it. But one type that's a roughage but also protein source is alfalfa hay. And we don't have a lot of that. It does not grow in this part of North Carolina. It doesn't grow in North Carolina really anywhere. It's more of a much colder crop. And so we have to pay a lot for that. If you have to basically import it from somewhere up north. And they run, I think a square bale can cost you around here, when you pay transportation costs, like $12 a bale. A square bale, a small square bale that weighs, I don't know, 40 pounds. Whereas these round bales are weighing significantly more. I mean, the average 1,000 pounds. And they can, most of the time, around here in this part of North Carolina, the going rate depends on the year, depends on the shortage versus if there's a surplus. I'd say on the average $50, $60 for a good quality round bale that's not being exposed to the elements. If it's been out in the rain, then it's going to be a little bit cheaper. I also want to throw this segment in here and talk about, because it happens to be here at the time I'm making the video. What you see here is bags and bags of different varieties of corn seed. And why am I showing you this if we're talking about nutrition for livestock animals? Because everything that you see here, every single bag, and there's hundreds and hundreds of bags here, will eventually become animal feed. But the difference is, if you look in the back corner, there's some of our leftover round bales.
We've got some round bales over there. But this right here, this is going to become concentrates is the classification this would be. And absolutely will go to feed hogs and chickens. Here on our farm, we have contracts for selling our corn at the end of the corn harvest, which will be in August and September, for us to sell it to Murphy Brown, which is a huge... You saw a rabbit, great. We have contracts, and a lot of farmers in this part of North Carolina have contracts with livestock producing companies that immediately we turn it over to them. We take it to their feed mill, then they turn it around and grind it up and add in some nutrients and some soybean meal and some other things, and then they ship it out to their hog and their chicken houses. So corn seed is considered, or corn when harvested would be considered a concentrate, and you can feed it to ruminant animals, but in much, much smaller amounts than you would be feeding your hay.